Welcome in tonight to our first episode of the ACC Huddle. With me tonight is Jay Ballard, who is from the Cavalier Connection. I'm Jeff Lowe. I'm also from the Cavalier Connection. And so this is our first episode of the ACC Huddle. And this is going to be your show for all your ACC information and your ACC fan talk. Jay, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Excited for this opportunity to be on the ACC Huddle with you, and I know we have some exciting guests tonight that are going to be talking to us. About something that's on the mind of a lot of people in the ACC, and that's conference realignment. So excited about that, and then we have some great football talk.
Yep. So tonight we're going to discuss the lawsuit between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson. And we earlier in the week, we were able to interview Ben Bird from the Bull City Coordinators. He is the College Huddle's representative of the Duke podcast, the voice of Duke for the College Huddle, and also a practicing attorney. And he's really been keeping up and on this lawsuit and had some very strong opinions regarding this lawsuit. And so we interviewed him earlier in the week. We're going to play that interview for you guys. And then when we complete that interview, we are going to be discussing a little college football as well. I know it's only April, but it's an exciting time. Spring football, spring games starting this weekend. I know in some places, Virginia is April 20th, and as well. But we want to discuss the ACC college football season. I know there's some over-unders that are out there, and so we want to one thing about myself and Jay, we like to talk when it comes to over-unders, point spreads, and stuff like that. You know, there's a little gambling in our blood as well. So definitely we want to discuss the upcoming season and kind of I want to get Jay's thoughts on how he thinks things are going to turn out and what our best bets are. So right now we're going to play this interview with Ben from the Bull City Coordinators. So sit back. It's a little bit of a interview here, a little bit longer, but he has some great information. And then we're going to come back, give a little reaction, and then we're going to discuss a little football. With us tonight, good evening. With us tonight, we have Ben Bird on from the Bull City Coordinators. And he is the Duke representative from the exciting new College Huddle podcast community. And so we wanted to bring him on. You know, there's been a lot going on regarding the lawsuits between the ACC and Florida State and ACC and Clemson, and some rulings have been happening lately. And Ben, I was just going to let you introduce yourself and kind of tell folks what you do and try to help break it down for Jay and I. We are not the brightest crayon in the box, or I'm going to speak for myself when it comes to
we don't represent the University of Virginia.
Yeah. My no UVA degrees here, but let you speak to it. And I know you wrote an excellent article on the collegehuddle.com website, and then some additional rulings came down after you wrote that article as well. So if you don't mind, could you speak to this lawsuit and explain exactly what's going on?
Well, not really explain exactly what's going on, and I'll explain why that is, because what I'd written on the College Huddle is going to have to be largely corrected, because as they say about Florida, it's too small to be a country and too crazy for the crazy house. And the recent ruling from that judge down there, and look, I'm a practicing attorney. Let me just give you my background. I'm a practicing attorney. I don't deal with copyright and intellectual property law, which is what this is. Contracts aren't a whole lot of what I do, but I went to law school at W&L here in Virginia, and you take a contracts course, and you spend most of your legal career either interpreting contracts, interpreting documents, interpreting statutes. So the interpretation of things is something that I do on a consistent basis and a regular basis. And this was all pretty straightforward. I mean, when you guys reached out to me, and I should say I'm very excited to be, I'm struggling to stay on target because I'm perturbed by what the court in Florida did. So let me just say first, I'm very glad and very excited to be part of the College Huddle. I'm looking forward to it while we still have an ACC and seeing what we can make happen. And I appreciate being asked to come on, and I appreciate these collaborations that we're doing. Here is what I was going to say after the ACC prevailed in largely preliminary motions in Charlotte in North Carolina, which is it's a victory for the ACC, but you still have to go and try the case and you have to move it forward. However, what the court in North Carolina did was the correct ruling, which said, look, I don't want to hear your sovereign immunity nonsense. You have a lot of contacts here with North Carolina. This is an appropriate forum to resolve this dispute. Why is it an appropriate forum to resolve this dispute? For obvious reasons. This is where the conference is. This is where the document was signed. This is where the headquarters is. The conference championship game is played here in football. This is the appropriate forum for this. And there were a bunch of nonsense motions that Florida State filed, and all those were overruled. And the opinion, I didn't digest it fully. I read most of it, was very well reasoned and intelligent. In the case in Florida, okay, which is checks notes, not your job because you are not the federal patent court, okay? You have no jurisdiction over that. Patent court should not enter into your vocabulary, okay? That sign is not on the building. When you don't have a judge who's that unprepared, who says he doesn't read the opinion from the North Carolina court, when ruling on a motion to stay the proceedings, there's a second hearing that's going to come up we'll talk about in a minute. The ACC says, well, hey, stay the proceedings, one, because we filed first, and two, by the time we got to the hearing, the North Carolina court is exercising jurisdiction. Normal rules are a court would say, look, these are all the same issues of fact. These are all the same issues of law. We're not going to have two courts litigating these topics on parallel tracks. It's a waste of judicial resources. And under basic principles of federalism, which is the kind of government system that we have, the North Carolina court has already addressed this. There's a concept called estoppel, which means you can't re-raise something that's already been determined. A sane court, which again, Florida too crazy for the crazy house, would say, we're going to back out of this and we're going to let this play out in Florida. You've got an appeal going now. You're appealing Judge Bledsoe's ruling on the sovereign immunity issue. It's not clear to me whether and to what extent additional litigation in the underlying case can occur. I think that the court there could say, no, we're going forward. You can still have your appeal. And it's very possible the North Carolina Supreme Court could say, I'm not wasting time with this. Your appeal's dismissed, as it should. That would be the right result. Now, if the ACC had filed second, then I think what we'd be arguing about is a motion to transfer venue to North Carolina, which would still be the appropriate forum. I think that's the appropriate forum. We can get into why federal court isn't a possibility in this case later, but that's what the Florida court should have done. Now, the Florida court could say, look, you've got this appeal going, and I think this would be a somewhat fair result, and could have done a Solomon split the baby situation and say, look, you're going to appeal Judge Bledsoe's ruling out of basic principles of comity, which means respect for other state courts. I'm going to let that go forward, but I'm going to let you, I'm not going to set the case for trial, but you all conduct discovery so that if the appeal works out in your favor, you can come back here ready to try the case and we're not kicking the can too far down the road. I think that's a fair compromise. The Florida court said no. And, you know, he starts talking about, well, do you know about the choke at the doke? And are you saying you own these? Yeah. We do own the rights. That's how this grant of rights works. So you can get paid. The ACC gets it. The ACC gets the money. The ACC distributes the money. I mean, that's simple. And he starts saying, well, how much is it going to cost to pay out? And he says, look, you can get the rights back. This is what the ACC attorney says. You can get the rights back. You just have to pay for them, which is how contracts work. This is all very basic. It's all very simple. It's all purely monetary. Florida State can get these rights back. It just has to pay for them, but Florida State doesn't want to do it because it's broke. It doesn't have the money to do it, and the funds just are not there, right? So Florida State wants the following to occur, which is bail us out of this deal that we made. The market's changed. Give us something that we didn't contract for, undo basic principles of contract law, upset the apple cart, and just let us out because we're screaming babies acting like toddlers. All right. That's essentially what Florida State is being asked to do. Now, keep in mind this. There's another hearing coming up. I think it's on April 22nd. There's still a motion to dismiss that the ACC has. I doubt the Florida State or the Florida judge is going to grant that. Okay. I don't think he's going to grant it because he already ruled from the bench on the motion to stay, and he's asked for an order confirming that that motion's denied. There's still some preliminary motions that need to be taken care of. So what does that mean? That means that if you get past the preliminary motions, you still have this other problem, which is proof, law, and everything else you need to win in defeating this grant of rights. Okay. The complaint is the start of things. It's where you begin. Okay. Then you get your discovery, you get your evidence, you take your depositions, you start molding the case together. Okay. You start molding this case together and you wrap the law around it. And that's what you've got. And there is nothing inside that bag for Florida State unless, and I do think that this is fair. Florida has a reputation for activism, which is sort of a buzzword for things that you don't agree with. So I'm not really sure how much meaning that has in the context of judicial activism anyway. But, they did pick a fight with one of the biggest, if not the biggest economic generator in the state, Disney, which would be akin to them just saying, NASA, get out. Okay. It's that dumb of an economic concept that they were engaged in. So it's possible that the Florida legislature or the Florida courts could just get super activist and do crazy things. I would not rule that possibility out. But again, if you go by existing law and it doesn't turn into a game of Calvin ball, I don't see how Florida State gets past this. I mean, here is the problem that Florida State's walked into, though. You can allege whatever you want to allege, but at some point you have to have proof, okay? And that's where they're in trouble, all right? Now, turning ahead to what could happen in North Carolina, I think what could happen in North Carolina is if they continue the litigation, right? And I would refer you all to David McKenzie. He is an IP lawyer on Twitter, he's an IP lawyer, but he's also on Twitter. He was on the OG podcast today, and I'm pulling up his handle now. It's at McKenzie, McKenzie Law. He's done some excellent articles on this, done very good writing about this. And essentially, I agree with him. What we have now is a race to the courthouse. And the idea is going to be Florida State's going to try to get there first with a verdict in Florida. The ACC is going to try to get there first with a verdict in North Carolina. Clemson, you're still going to have some preliminary motions coming up. I still think that Clemson judge is probably going to say, the Pickens County judge, where I'm from, in the 864, is going to say, look, I'm not hearing this case. There's two other cases pending. We're not going to throw a third one into this. So he's either going to punt it to Charlotte or he's just going to put a stay in place. That's possible. Whichever side gets a judgment in their favor first under basic federalism concepts and the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution would be the winner. Okay. I mean, I don't know enough about when the judgments and the orders fully become final in federal court. For example, it's not final till, for example, in a criminal conviction until all your appeals are exhausted. I don't know enough about the rules in North Carolina or Florida to comment on that. But that's going to be a real issue, okay? So I wouldn't call it a constitutional crisis because that's not really what it is. It would be a constitutional crisis if one side tries to ignore the full faith and credit clause. If we want to tease this out and talk about some other things that could happen, I know I'm going for a while here with kind of hypotheticals, but ESPN could just file a massive lawsuit, and that could drag it into federal court. I would assume ESPN's a resident of Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Florida State is its citizenship would probably be Connecticut. ESPN's Florida State would be Florida. The ACC's is complicated. I believe it is a resident of every state of which it has a member institution, right? But we don't have anybody in Connecticut. The one potential good thing of not adding UConn yet, or haven't done it yet. So you could ESPN, if there's a situation where you have two competing state court rulings and it doesn't know what to follow, could file what's called a declaratory judgment action in federal court and get an answer to that. All right. So anyway, it's a race to the courthouse now, and I think it was a mistake of a ruling. However, Florida State still got to prove its case, and I still think that's going to be very, very hard, and we can't lose sight of that. So that's my very long answer about what we have going on with these three cases.
How much would Florida State have to pay to regain their rights?
Well, you're going to have to pay whatever they would earn through 2036, which is a little bit in flux because you have the college football playoff deal now.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently ESPN has the unilateral option to renew the contract in 2027. So let's just say, for example, ESPN does, and it increases that amount, right? Of what the current payment is, which I don't remember, but it's a lot. So I've heard numbers of like $500 million.
Wow.
There was some stuff today talked about. Well, that's what happens when you have these long grant of rights.
Right.
Like we forgot the ACC didn't understand the LeBron James contract rule, which is always maximize your value and have short contract.
Right.
Okay. So it could be more than that. But Florida State, under basic contract principles, and the ACC was very clear about this in the hearing, said, look, if Florida State leaves, we will sell the rights back, but they have to buy them. So it's no different than any other contract that you enter into. I mean, this is fairly straightforward.
So is there any potential for kind of like, I think what we've all recognized is that it was a very bad contract for the schools in the ACC. Is there any, and I know you talked about, that being, the case where you're upset you made a bad deal, but the conference commissioner that put that deal in place is no longer here. Is there anything like that where you can say, hey, this is such a bad deal, it's not even in good faith that would have a court standing?
I wouldn't think so, because you have to ask, the main thing is there consideration for the deals? Now, consideration means inducing you to do something you otherwise wouldn't do, right? So I don't know what your background is, but let's say y'all are contractors, right? You're not going to go do contracting work on a house just to do it, right? That's not your own. Someone's going to have to pay you to do it. That payment in return for your work, that's the consideration, right? That's the consideration that goes both ways, right? You give them the work in return for the money. That makes the agreement enforceable. You have that here, okay? Florida State alleged something about one of the agreements not having consideration. I don't think that's the case because you have ongoing payments, right? I don't see what the contract defense to this is. So the fact that it's a bad deal, there is something called unconscionability, but how many tens of millions of dollars do they get from this TV deal? And how long have they gotten?
It's like $36 million a year, somewhere in that neighborhood. And,
right.
And the Big Ten schools are getting around 70 to 80, SEC and Big Ten, which I think is the real base of the argument, for Florida State.
Right. But different markets and a change in market expectations is not a defense to a contract. Otherwise, you could never have an enforceable contract if the markets change, right? So you could say, is it an unconscionable deal? I've never seen, it's almost impossible to apply unconscionability to get a contract voided. And this isn't unconscionable. This is tens of millions of dollars in return for a leasing of your media rights.
Right.
When you can purchase your way out of it. So I don't know how legally what the framework is going to be for the judge to just upend centuries, and I'm not making this up, centuries of contract law. I mean, this stuff isn't brand new. This is developed. We're a common law system. We have our roots back to ancient England, okay? This stuff is developed over a long, long time, okay? Now, so it's hard for me, having gone through law school for 3 years and then being a practicing attorney since 2008, to see how you get around this other than just arguing, well, the deal that we voluntarily entered into and agreed to enter into and thought at the time was a good deal, which turns out we were wrong, let us out of this contract. That's not really how this works.
Right.
So, in your mind, when this is all said and done, is the ACC going to be going away? Do you think how's this all going to shake out?
I can't. Well, so first, any speculation, and all this is just speculation.
Right.
Conference restructuring. I don't use the term realignment because it's restructuring. Right. It's more like a bankruptcy proceeding, I think, than anything else.
Right.
We have the new college football playoff deal, right, which guarantees the ACC third tier payments, which, given our ratings on TV, actually makes sense, but whatever. And by the way, if Florida State was such a great brand, why did it get left out of the college football playoff? I mean, if it's the brand that it thinks it is, let's just think about that for a minute, okay? So I think there will be an ACC. It will exist. For how long, I'm not sure. And the reason that I say that is it's hard to predict today what's going to happen in this litigation, right? It's hard for me to predict today what's going to happen in this litigation. But worst case scenario is Florida State leaves. Clemson might leave, although ESPN could look at this and say, look, the ACC is a good value to us because we're not paying a whole lot for it. We're going to increase our brand, our payments. That's possible, right? So you could get some more money out of it, but I just don't think Florida State is going to accept anything less than SEC or Big Ten money. And, I mean, you all can answer this. What does the SEC get from adding Florida State that it doesn't already have from Florida?
Yeah, they've got the market. They've got the state.
Right. And now ask about the Big Ten. Maybe the Big Ten gets something out of it, but it doesn't fit the academic profile for the Big Ten.
Right. So
it goes to the Big 12.
I don't. Yeah,
I can't see that
I don't
happening.
see it.
So I heard somebody say, and I can't remember who it was, that if the conference got a majority of teams to say we want to dissolve the ACC, then this deal would basically go away and the lawsuits would go away and the ACC would just fold up shop if you had a majority of schools that wanted to leave in a potential conference restructuring. Is that accurate as far as the law goes, as far as you know? And sorry to put you on the spot with that. I know we didn't talk about asking that, but
no, you're fine. The problem, the only hesitation I have in answering that question is someone's going to have to assume those debts, which you saw the Pac-12 fighting about now or recently.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I don't know what the ESPN contract says about that. So they're not going to leave, I don't think, until there's a determination from the ACC about whether there's going to be a payment. I mean, I think, or an extension of the contract. I think, assuming ESPN extends the contract, that Florida State and Clemson may stay in here. And Clemson hasn't really said it wants to leave. It's just trying to get that buyout down as it's a public institution. I think Clemson's handled this better of the two and more honest of the two, but we'll have to wait and see. So could the ACC dissolve? It could do that at any time. However, the problem is going to be, what do you do with this TV obligation that you have and this contract that you have, right? So that would be the difficult part that's coming up, which is why I think if that's going to happen, you would see it occur closer to the end of whatever the TV deal is. And the fact, it's 2024 now, these are when you see these movements happen. So if ESPN doesn't want to extend it, you would think you'd probably find that out now, right?
Yeah, I mean, 2036 is so far away. I mean, I can't see a world where they just continue down the path they're on. I think the genie's out of the bottle, and I'm not sure that the outcome of the lawsuits is really even going to determine if the ACC continues to exist. Either way it goes, because I totally trust your opinion. If the law is on the ACC side here, which is, if I'm understanding you, I think it is. Somehow, some way, I do think the ACC, as it's existed for, I'm 44, for most of my life, whether it be with 8, 9 schools or 16 schools, it won't exist in that way. And if it does, it'll be filled with teams like a JMU, an Old Dominion, some teams that want to move in after you've lost 3/4 of the teams that you know and love, because they've moved on to the Super 2.
Yeah, I don't think that it's hard to see what the ACC would look like if you lose like North Carolina State, UVA, Florida State. If you lose all those schools, what is it going to be? Is there going to be some attempt from kind of the smaller private schools like Duke, Miami, Boston College, Wake, to create a basketball conference again, or what are you going to have happen? I mean, I don't know.
Or get with the Big East, and
right.
something.
Right. Could you bring in? I mean, UConn's football wouldn't add a whole lot. I saw Brett Friedlander writing about adding UConn, which I don't have a problem with, but I thought it was odd given some of Brett's earlier statements that football really is the driving, is the driving thing. I think it would be fine to add UConn, but the future of the ACC, I think, is unsettled. And two things, though, that I do want to say is earlier you had said that this was a bad contract for the ACC schools. Potentially, but it kept the ACC together for 2036 and gave these teams guaranteed home till 2036. I'm not so sure it's a bad deal, but I also think given the time frame from where we are today and where the lawsuits are filed to 2036, I don't foresee a rubric where the case gets settled. Okay. And let me give you an example. I try cases, but we also settle cases. Settlement happens when each side sees the other side's wants, needs, and amount of willingness to pay to get the case settled. Okay. So, for example, let's say I have a case with my client's very injured, but proving that the defendant was at fault for what happened is difficult for me. Let's say my case is worth $1 million on a perfect day with all the evidence, right? Not having all the evidence that we can't put together for whatever reason, or convincing a jury of our evidence, we're going to succeed maybe 50% of the time at best, right? So that says you should be willing to maximize your recovery at $500,000, right? But you have to understand that's your best day. So you've got to settle it somewhere between your best day, which is $500,000, and your worst day, which is $0. And if you have that discussion with the defendant or defendants, right, they get that and you're talking their terms, then you get it there, right? You get it done somewhere within those bookends, right? Okay. You just tell me what are the bookends here that are feasible to talk settlement, right? How is FSU going to get $500 million or more dollars? Mm-hmm. I mean, the ACC's got to protect the conference and these other schools like Duke, okay, like Miami, like Pitt. They're like, hey, we need to stay together. This is our best TV deal, right? This is the best we're going to have. Where are those interests aligned with? Where does the Venn diagram overlap right? Where's that common ground to produce a settlement? I just don't see it. I myself don't see it.
Unless if other schools start jumping in, you think, like, if more lawsuits come?
You'd have to have enough schools want to vote to end the conference and get out of this arrangement. But here's the thing. Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 and went to the SEC because they knew they had a landing spot, right? Oregon, which checks notes as a big brand, is going to the Big 10, right? On a reduced intake, right?
Right.
They're not getting a full share.
Got you.
Right.
So if you're Florida State and you're Clemson, where do you go? I mean, I think Clemson is a more appealing brand because I think they're easier to work with, right? But they haven't said we're leaving the SEC or leaving the ACC to go to the SEC or the Big 12 or wherever. They haven't said we're leaving, which tells me they may not have a home yet.
Right.
So where are these other schools going to go? Right. And if, let's say you create a new conference, let's say you, and you may be, Jay, to your point, you may be able to dissolve the ACC. But again, I don't know what that ESPN contract says. Let's say you do that, right? And you vote to dissolve it. And you say, we're going to create the Coastal Conference, right? We're going to create the All Coast Conference, right? We're going to have Stanford, Cal, SMU, Miami, all the East Coast teams, Louisville. And what TV deal are you going to get that's better than what you have now?
Yeah, right. Well, yeah.
I mean, that, right. I mean,
I think it comes down to at least my thought is if the Big 10 or SEC wants you and say they want to go to 20 or God forbid 24, if they want 24, we're done. But if they wanted to go to 20 and poach Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, Clemson, and then the Big 12 is willing. And see, that's the thing I don't really understand how these conversations come to be, right? Because you're in a contract, you have a home. These backdoor channel conversations where you almost have to have a deal in place before you can step out. You hear these rumors about the Magnificent Seven, which UVA was a part of. But the forward-facing answer from Virginia is, we want the ACC to succeed. Well, of course, everybody wants the ACC to succeed. We all want that in a perfect world. But I think, like I said earlier, I think we're past the point almost of no return. And football's driving. We expanded the playoffs, more money for that. And before we even play the first playoff with more teams, they're already talking about, taking football out of basically the NCAA and having these two super conferences, or what was it, 80 teams? 80 teams total, I think.
Yeah.
And you would have a relegation system, kind of like in soccer for the smaller schools. And you'd have pods where it was almost like you had all these scenarios already laid out. Clearly, these conversations are being had. It's like, how does this happen? And does this lawsuit even really matter? Because when it comes down to it, with all that money on the table, who might just say, "Oh, you want $500 million? Okay, here's a check," or whatever it is,
Yeah, I would love it if we could separate football from the rest of the Olympic sports, because remember how great UVA and Duke used to be.
Yeah.
It was a big game. State was big. Georgia Tech, remember with Cremens, they had those guards. I mean, I would much prefer that. What I'll tell you is, and there's been some talk about Duke ending up in the Big 12. Duke's in a much rougher spot. And this is part of the problem that the ACC has with it all being about television markets. You got 4 teams in North Carolina, 2 of which are small private schools. Miami's a small private school, but football, it actually does well. Tech's been down, right? And I mean, look, I got to admit, you go to a night game at Lane Stadium, that's the best venue in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But it hadn't been where it needs to be. And a lot of the schools that they thought were going to be good just haven't. So how do you deal with trying to make football a thing, the thing, but still have these other sports? I would just much prefer we break them off, because look, if Duke ends up in the Big 12 and we're playing Baylor twice a year or Kansas twice a year, the novelty of that's going to wear off fast. I mean, you know, it is hard for me to get excited about that as a fan. I mean, playing Arizona State. I mean, Arizona's a good team. I'm not saying that they're not a good team. I'm not saying Kansas and Baylor aren't good teams. But am I really going to get invested in them playing, you know, Colorado?
Right.
Again, no knock on BYU, but who cares?
Right.
I mean, who is going to care about those teams? And some of the other schools that are in the Big 12. And again, BYU is a fine institution, and I'm not criticizing them at all, but I'm just saying, like, I've invested a lot in them playing NC State and then playing Wake.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you guys are the same way with UVA.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not the same. I agree. It won't be the same. It's like and Jay and I both went to ODU, and you know, the old CAA. There was a lot of fun. You had regional rivalries and the VCUs, George Mason, William and Mary, you know, just to name a few. And then, you know, ODU got football, and then they ended up in Conference USA. And God knows it, we were all over the country, and it wasn't the same to me.
No,
like,
it hasn't been the same.
And it hasn't.
I wish we'd have stayed down in football.
Right. It'd been more, yeah. And the same thing with the ACC. Like, we were talking the other night with the BYU podcast, and I'm 45 and grew up ACC. Like you said, those ACC tournaments, Bobby Crimmins and Georgia Tech, Jeff Jones, of course, Coach K, Dean Smith. That stuff is fun. Jim Valvano. You know, those are the things I would definitely miss. And
well, right, and I named the biggest schools, and I shouldn't have been knocking them, but I just made a list here. I pulled it up on my phone. Here are the schools that you would play. All right now in the Big 12. Again, we mentioned BYU. No knock on them, but are you really going to care about playing UCF in basketball?
Right.
Or are you going to care about playing Cincinnati in basketball?
No.
Iowa State in basketball?
No.
K-State in basketball? I'm sure Manhattan, Kansas is lovely. Okay, but Oklahoma State, Texas Christian, Texas Tech.
Right.
I mean, maybe because of the Virginia Tech connection there, he's at A&M, right? The Buzz.
Yeah,
Buzz.
he's at A&M.
And then West Virginia. I mean,
right. That's probably the best.
Supposed to care about that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the same. You know, I think that from a Virginia perspective only, we are one of the fortunate schools, I think, in the ACC that would have a landing spot with either the SEC or the Big Ten. And I don't even really understand what all of the AAU accreditation means and what's tied to that. But I know that we have that, and that's a desirable quality, especially with the Big Ten. They won't take you without that. And so it's almost like a game of Survivor. You know, you can say everything you want, but when you go write a name down on that piece of paper, and you know where are you going to go? It'll be interesting to see how this all really unfolds. You know, if you could see the future 5 years from now, what it looked like, and what the conferences look like, it would be really interesting, I'm sure, to see. because it's not going to be what we all think. I'm sure. I really don't believe we'll be where we are right now.
Well, you guys are in a good spot because I do think the Big Ten would like to get you, and I think that it opens some stuff up. I think it'd be a good spot. And look, I've been critical of some of these Big 12 teams, but I think it's a great conference. It's survived. It's done very well. But I'm just talking about me as a fan.
Right.
I just don't care about these teams.
Yeah, when we were talking with the BYU podcast, we had, if you could give me a conference that had Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Duke, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, give me South Carolina, Maryland, maybe Georgia Tech. That's all, that's all I would want, to be honest. And I would love it,
Right. I mean, there's just so many, if you end up playing like University of South Carolina, okay, or Arkansas, or LSU, as a Duke fan, I'm not going to care. A lot of those schools have great programs with them and great teams, and they do wonderful things. But if you're asking me, am I going to get invested in that? Probably not. It's just
When Jeff and I were both at Old Dominion, I think it was probably like the 99 season. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously ODU didn't have football at that point, and we basically followed the UVA team because everything was within 5 hours of a drive, and at that point we didn't have any real responsibility. So we would take off Saturday morning. We went to Duke. We went to North Carolina. We went to NC State. Yeah, I mean, we've been to I've drove to Florida State for a game from Virginia. Middle of the night, took off. It was a night game. Got there about 3 or 4 hours before the game. Tailgated. Went to the game. We got beat 36-3. I got back in the car. Drove to Georgia. Right. Spent the night, and came back home the next day. It's just. It was exciting stuff, but unfortunately, I think those days could be coming to an end soon. I hope I'm wrong. But
and that's the thing. The schools just want to get as much money as possible, right?
Yes.
Okay, they're not caring about this element of NIL taxes fans, right? NIL is. I'm not saying students shouldn't get money. I'm fine with it. But the current system of taxing fans and having boosters do this, I don't think is a good system. The school should just employ these students, and that solves the problem. But you're not caring about the actual fans that you're taxing to pay some of this NIL stuff and these collective things. Why make it harder for us to go? I mean, I don't want to go to Stillwater, right, for a game. I don't want to, I'd go to Stanford and Cal just so I could go to those cities that those places are in, right? So I think one of my favorite sci-fi authors is Philip K. Dick. I think he hung around Berkeley a lot. So I actually would be interested in going there for that purpose. Mm-hmm. But are you talking about, am I going to make a yearly trip out to that? No.
Right.
And they're not cheap trips.
No.
Like what we did, we get in the car and we drive. You can't be running all across the country and have a job and pay for all that. Those are getting on a plane.
Yeah. Jeff and I were donating plasma just to get there. I'm kidding a little bit, but
oh gosh. Well, we really appreciate you coming on and helping explain this thing to us. And I know there's more to come. And we'll probably reach out again. And hopefully during football season, we'll get you guys on. And actually, we're in baseball season right now. And so ACC Huddle is going to be on every Friday night at 9:00. And so we definitely are looking forward to reaching out to you guys and the rest of the ACC market and all the ACC podcasts coming on. We really appreciate you coming on tonight, Ben. And a shout out to the Bull City coordinators. You want to tell us how to follow you? I know you got a couple shows that you have.
Absolutely. Check us out, bullcitycoordinators.com. We're everywhere you get your podcast. The podcast is Bull City Coordinators, a Duke football coverage podcast. But we also started, it's not on Apple yet because of its stupid closed system, but whatever. I'll try to figure that out. I started a new podcast called the Classical Antiquity Side Quest, where we cover topics from the historical period of classical antiquity. We've got one episode out about Alexander the Great. We've got a couple more in the works right now. It's just kind of a little side quest. Sorry. For me, I enjoy it a lot, but I'm excited to be part of the College Huddle and to do things like this. I'm going to be on the BYU podcast as well to talk about some of these legal issues. Hopefully I won't be as angry as I was tonight.
We were excited. So when I was chatting with you earlier today, I told Jay, I said, this is going to be a good one tonight. I said, he's wound up. He's ready to go. Because I had already seen your, we follow all of y'all. And so I've been following along. I was like, dang, some stuff it broke today. And I was like, oh, we're catching you on a good day here. So that's good TV for us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I'm glad to do it. And hopefully the next update will be things are going better for the ACC, so we can keep this together a little bit longer.
Right. Hey, ACC has been pooped on here recently a little too much for our taste. And, with this basketball tournament and, how many teams were getting in, and the ACC tournament had a great showing in the NCAA tournament. And so it's good to see some positive things, because your Seth Davises of the world and Joe Lunardi's, like, they just couldn't understand.
When we talked to you during the season, and we had talked to you about Dukes and, kind of talking basketball for a second, you were kind of close right on their ceiling, but we had said, man, if you had been told all you got to do is beat NC State to get to the Final Four, every Duke fan would have signed up for that. But, and you can thank Tony Bennett for his poor coaching in the last 5 seconds.
Hit the free
throw, them even
man.
Being in the tournament to begin with.
Just hit the shot. No,
hit the shots. You're right.
I think what we learned from this year was that Shire is a really good coach. I think
the class he has coming in, he could be a terrible coach and still win 20 games.
Phil Jackson.
Good gosh.
Yeah, I'm just, if you look at the what this roster had to do, moving Flip out of his position and the way, and I don't want to knock Mark Mitchell, but he was very inconsistent this year. There were a lot of gaps in the roster. There were too many guards. We don't have too many point guards. We don't have that 6'6" slasher that North Carolina always seems to have.
Yeah.
But he still got this team to the Elite Eight in year 2.
Yeah.
So people who are upset with Shire, I think, should chill. This was a really good year for John, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Mitchell hit the portal today.
I did. Yeah, I saw you hit the portal. You got a bunch of young guys coming in to play his position. And I hate to lose him because he's going to be a junior, but I think I understand for Mark, he's probably thinking this has gone as far as I can at Duke, and maybe a change of scenery will do him well.
Well, hopefully he'll head to Charlottesville. We need some big men.
We do.
Well, you take his rebounding and his defense are going to be hard to replace. I like
it in great.
Yeah, I always liked Mark. I liked watching him play. I thought he played hard, but I just think the team maybe needed something that he couldn't give, which is not a criticism of him. It's just sometimes you can't do what a team needs you to do. That's not a knock on you.
Sure. Yep.
Well, Ben, we appreciate your time tonight, and we look forward to collaborating more in the future. Thank you for joining the ACC Huddle, and we will definitely be in touch soon.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Have a great evening.
You too.
And that was Ben Bird from the Bull City Coordinators Duke podcast, giving his takes on the lawsuit between the ACC and Florida State and Clemson, and thoughts on, possible realignment and things like that. Jay, do you have any specific takes off of that? I know it's kind of a Debbie Downer type of a segment there.
Yeah, I think we covered most of it in the interview with Ben, but I mean, it seems like his opinion is the ACC has the law on its side, so I'm going to trust his expert opinion. That being said, I don't think it changes my opinion on the conference probably not lasting. Definitely, I can't see the ACC existing in 5 years even. I hope I'm wrong, because God knows we love the ACC, but we'll see. A lot of money is at stake, and typically money is what drives people to, destroy these conferences like the Pac-12. Been around forever, and I would say greed kind of drove them out of business.
No doubt. Yeah. We're pro ACC. We're the ACC Huddle, and we want the ACC around to the end of time for us.
That's right.
But that's a little Debbie Downer segment there a little bit. Ben did a great job explaining things for us, but we want to pick it up a little bit and have some positive things to do. So what we wanted to talk about, football season is coming. It's coming. We got spring games coming up here over the next few weeks. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about is over-unders. The over-unders for the upcoming ACC season and where they currently stand. And so Jay and I, we are gamblers, as we said earlier in the show. And so we'll give
another thing that we also enjoy is fantasy football.
Yeah, fantasy football as well. And maybe we'll have a side Cavalier connection or ACC Huddle, something, fantasy football league this year, because we sure didn't do too hot in the tournament bracket, or I didn't.
I think I finished sixth, so
I finished about 36th. But anyway, so what we want to do is I do want to show everybody the over-unders for all the ACC teams. And then Jay and I, we're going to play a little game. We're going to do a little draft. And this is kind of like a fantasy football draft, but it's a fantasy over-under draft. So there's 17 ACC teams. And we're going to –
Why don't you just pull them up as we go through and pick them? Like as we make our picks, you just go to it then? Can you do that?
Yep. And so we're going to bring these up here. So this is our over-unders. So the number one team over-under is Clemson. Well, Clemson is a 9.5 over-under total. This is their schedule, and I apologize if it's tough to read. But, opening with Georgia in Atlanta, that's a tough opening matchup. But, over under 9.5 for Clemson. Also, and I'm going to get to them, FSU is also a 9.5, as well as Miami, who's a 9.5. And so Jay, out of these 9.5 teams, I'm gonna let you have first pick of the 9.5s.
Oh, this is easy because my first pick was coming. I didn't know we were going to split them up like this. But my first pick was actually coming from this group. So,
I have one from this group too. So we'll see.
Okay, I'm 100% playing the U under.
Oh my, yeah,
under that 9.5 for the U.
Yeah,
that would be my first pick out of all of the ACC over/under records. Look, I mean, Miami. I think that Vegas is just counting on, and if you can pull their schedule up, I think Vegas is kind of counting on the fact that people see the name Miami and they've got a big brand. But look, it's hard to win 10 games. You can't lose but 2. And
right.
I look at the opener. I know Florida's down this year, but in the swamp, week 1, is that? I'm not going to say that's a win. I mean,
right.
It could be.
Right.
Okay. I think that they rattle off, 2, maybe 3 easy ones. I don't know what South Florida's got this year, But Virginia Tech, I'm going to tell you right now, I'll take Virginia Tech in that game. Then you go across the country to Cal. None of the Louisville to me is a loss. Florida State is a loss. They pretty much have to have everything go right to hit that 10. I don't see it happening. So definitely give me that under 9.5 for the U.
Miami has been one of those teams I would have taken them too. They, every year it just feels like they have a high projection of wins, and they start the year highly ranked or in the top 25, and then they've had some struggles, no doubt. And that's a tough schedule. Exactly what you said, having to travel to Florida. Virginia Tech's going to be tough this year. Louisville's supposed to be tough. Florida State, I already told you, that's they're a 9.5 over under. And so 12 games to win 10, you can only lose 2 games. And then, a slip up in there somewhere in a game that you should win.
Right.
And next thing you know, you're at 8 or 7 wins. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do? You want to just continue going through these teams? And if I see one I like,
I was going to say, well, what I thought was if you have one in mind that you feel strongly about, you pull that one, and then I can't use them. So like I've drafted Miami. Now you make a pick. You can go anywhere on the board and then pull that schedule up.
Got you. Well, so actually, I'm going to go not far from where we were just at, Florida State. And I've got them for an under as well. And the reason being, once again, you can only lose 2 games to hit the over.
Right.
And as you look at the schedule already, and Clemson's a tough game. SMU's, they're supposed to be okay.
Yeah.
At Notre Dame and Florida to end the year. And then on top of it, and their quarterback this year is DJ Ugalele, who was, we know him at the ACC from Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to, where'd he go last year? Oregon.
He's the most overrated quarterback, I think, that has come into the ACC in years. I mean, and he comes back, and it's like Florida State has this guy who's just going to lead them to the promised land.
Right.
I'm telling you right now, it's a huge step down.
Yes.
From the kid they had last year.
No doubt.
I mean,
I was going to say also, and so this is something I'm going to cover, on the ACC Huddle channel on a later date. But I was doing some research on the Sporting News, had their ACC QB rankings, and DJ Ugalele was ranked number 2 in the ACC.
That's outrageous.
And for me, that was a bit high for my taste. Clemson, when he played at Clemson, they had such a good defense, and it was like the quarterback is what was holding that team back. And then he went out to Oregon State. Now he's back in the ACC, and I just don't see 9.5 wins.
I don't either. And do you think that they play with? I mean, they're going to have a chip on their shoulder from the way last year ended,
right?
But how much of that team is back?
And also that's so Jay, one more stat that I just in my research for the ACC Huddle, FSU is the 15th ranked team in the ACC out of 17 in returning production. So a team that was a national title contender last year is bringing back 58% of their production, which is actually ranked 83rd nationally. And if you think about a team that was that good, and then you lose your stud quarterback, and now you got DJ Ugalele. I have nothing against the guy. I hope he does well. We pull for the ACC. We're Virginia fans, but we also want ACC to succeed. And I just don't see. I mean, I don't see where the 9.5 is coming from. I would say Vegas always tends to know something, but I would go lay some money down on the under there.
Yeah, I would agree. Under there is, I think it'll be close. I think they win 9, and that Notre Dame game is probably going to be their 3rd loss.
Right.
But if they somehow get to Notre Dame with only one, you'll be sweating it out. But if I had to choose one or the other, I would take the under there.
Right. And like you said, I'm not expecting a bad season, but at the same time, I don't expect what we had last season either. So
yeah.
So Jay, what do you have? You got another one in your brain?
So you're going down to the 7.5, and this one hurts my heart.
Oh, I was going to
take. You already know where I'm going.
What you're going to say?
I'm taking the over for Virginia Tech. So look, this team returns almost everyone. Right now, there's one caveat here: if something happens to drones, I don't know that they have anybody who's in place. But looking at their schedule, at Vanderbilt, when Marshall, even though they lost to Marshall last year, Marshall's coming to Blacksburg this year. That's a win. At Old Dominion, that's actually been a bugaboo game for them.
Yep.
But I think Pry they're returning so much. I can't see them losing that game. Rutgers won't be easy, but again, they're in Blacksburg for that one. So to me, they're going to be 4-0 heading to Miami, a team that I've already said I think is overrated. I could see Virginia Tech getting that game. Honestly, it scares me a little bit as a Virginia fan to look at this schedule.
Yes.
Because I don't see a game here where they can't win.
Yep.
And that includes Clemson, because Clemson comes to Blacksburg.
Yes. No.
So to me, this is I probably should have taken this as my first pick. I feel so strongly about this. But I feel like Virginia Tech is at worst, an 8-win team, and God bless America, don't let this happen, because we love the ACC, but we hate Virginia Tech. Personally, we love the people. We don't like the teams. But there's nothing there that says they can't go 11-1, 12-0.
Yeah, if you look at
that, but I certainly expect 8.
Right. No, I agree. I definitely. So I've got all of the over-unders over here, and I've made my little markings of O or U of what I would take on every one of them, and I definitely had an over here. And you look at that schedule, and it's a little bit scary because I don't know what Miami's going to do to start the year. Now, if Miami starts out and does well to start out, they'll be favored at Miami probably. But what other game are they? Potentially Clemson, but that's at home. They're going to be favored potentially in all these games.
Right.
Stanford's not projected to do anything.
Right. They avoid Florida State.
ODU, crazy enough, ODU might be the tough. On the road at ODU might be the toughest game. They've just had trouble with
because the fans. Virginia Tech's going to travel well, but that will be a Old Dominion crowd.
It's almost like how Virginia Tech has our number. ODU's just had their number.
They have played them well. Even last year in Blacksburg, ODU gave them another tough game, ultimately losing. But I don't see any team here that you're going to know a lot about Clemson by the time you get to that game. Again, it's in Blacksburg. God forbid they put that as a night game, and I just don't trust Clemson in that environment. So anyway, we don't have to spend any more time talking about the bad guys.
Yeah, we don't want to do that. So my next one, I've got the problem with this format here is I need to look at a schedule. I don't have a schedule right in front of me, but
go ahead, pull it up.
I'm going to pull this one up. If I need to use a mulligan here.
Yeah, who are you pulling up?
I want to go to Stanford, and I want to take a look. Okay. So Stanford is a 3.5 over under, and their quarterback to start the year is his name is Ashton Daniels, and I don't see a whole lot of positive things written there, but they do have a quarterback that a freshman who could compete for that starting job, who was ranked number 11 nationally in his signing class as a quarterback. And so sometimes as a Virginia fan, we kind of know, even though it didn't pan out in a bunch of wins, if they give him the job and he starts out early, and there's a lot of growing pains, this is a tough schedule.
Yeah.
It's a tough schedule.
It is a tough schedule. I was
As I'm
wondering if you were
looking
going
at
to back out.
I'm trying to find 4 wins is what I'm trying to do. And
Yeah, I don't see 4 wins on that
TCU's
schedule.
not a win. Cal Poly potentially 1. Cal's a chance, but that's at Cal. San Jose State's at San Jose State. Wake Forest. Wake Forest could be a win. That's 2. That's
Could
at
be.
home.
That's a could be.
I'm going off of the potential of a freshman starting at quarterback.
Yeah. I think they'll go with the 24-year-old kid, but
let's move on. Let's go to Wake Forest. So Wake Forest is a 4.5, and I'm going to verify it real quick, but I have them as an under. But North Carolina A&T is a win. Virginia, we hope, is a loss. Ole Miss is a loss. Louisiana, I don't know. Wake Forest, though, if you look at their team, their offense was not very good last year, and they've got 3 quarterbacks who are going to be battling for their job. So when there's 3, if you got 3 quarterbacks, usually you don't have 1. So, and they're returning the 5th most production in the ACC, and that could be a positive or it could be a negative, because if there's a struggle,
good production last year.
Right, and you got to figure. I'm figuring to get 5 wins, North Carolina A&T's got to be a win, maybe Louisiana, Stanford potentially, Cal. I'm having a hard time finding 5 wins.
Yeah,
I'm going to take the under for Wake Forest.
All right, so that's your play. All right, I'm writing. I'm typing these into our, where you gave me the notes here.
Oh yeah, I'm writing them on my paper as well. So you
so you can stay at the 4.5, and this is going to be a little bit of a homer pick, but going on to the orange and blue of Virginia, I like this number a lot. I think it's too low. It's probably appropriate based on the last 2 years. We went 3-7, didn't finish that season. But then last year, 3-9. And so you say, well, can they really improve 2 games? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think they can actually improve maybe even 3 games. I'm saying Richmond's a win. And if you haven't read my article in the College Huddle, I wrote an article on kind of 3 defining games for the season for Virginia. So check that out. But I like Richmond. I like Wake Forest to potentially be a win. I like Maryland to be a potential win. At Coastal's a potential win. Boston College, Louisville, probably Boston College, more winnable there. And then you look at the second half, and the game that they would probably have to steal there is at Pitt to maybe get to bowl eligibility. I think they could potentially get through those first 6 at 5-1, and people might say I'm crazy. But we return our entire offensive line that got so much better as the year progressed. If you only watch the Virginia Tech game, you'd think they were awful, but that's really not a clear look at who they are. I mean, they were playing much better going into that game. We have Calandria, who's an exciting quarterback, but we also have quarterback depth, which in the college game is important. We've got 3 guys who have started substantial amounts of a season. Tony Muskett will come back, and then the transfer out of New Mexico State, I believe, or was it New Mexico? New Mexico State, I believe, Gavin Fracas. And so at the most important position, we're set. We're going to be solid there. We've got to replace Malik Washington, but we got the kid Tyree from Notre Dame. We return Malachi Fields. There's just a lot of weapons on this team. And then the defense returns Jonas Saker, Cam Robinson. You've got talent at all 3 levels. I just see this team that was so close, and I don't want to spend too much time on them because they're our team, but I've talked about this on our podcast. There's levels to a coach and a program's progression. Lose big, lose small, win big. And right now we're in that lose small, win small window. Last year we lost a lot in small and very close games. And I think this year we turn that corner a little bit and at least get to 6 and win a bowl game, or get to a bowl game.
I mean, I like your pick there. I would have definitely picked that one as well. Not to be a homer, but you did one quick point on that. Virginia also they're number 2. Virginia Tech was number 1 in returning players from last year, returning production, and Virginia Tech is actually number 1 nationally in that as well. And Virginia is number 2 in the ACC and 5th nationally. So for good or for bad. But
it matters in college.
I feel like it does. And your skill positions, Virginia really, I mean, the amount of skill position players that they added, the offensive line, the continuity of bringing those guys back. I definitely see I had them as an over for myself as well. I'm going to move over to Georgia Tech. They're 5.5. And we get, once again, I got to look through these schedules here. I wish I had printouts of the schedules so I could research while I'm talking to you here. But I was feeling an over, but Florida State's an L. Georgia State's a win. Syracuse is winnable. VMU. Who is VMU? I don't know who it is. I'm gonna give them a win. I'm gonna give them a win in that one. That's 2. Louisville's gonna be tough this year. Duke is not as good as they had been, so that's a winnable game being at home. North Carolina's not the same team. Notre Dame's is going to be an L, I'm sure. I'm guessing. Virginia Tech at Tech's an L. Miami, that's a team you just don't know about ever.
Yeah.
NC State's going to be tough, and Georgia's going to be tough. That's going to be tough to get the 6 wins there as I went through that. Georgia State, VMU's 2. Well, I was thinking of an over, but I'm going to go under the 5.5 for Georgia Tech. Their quarterback, Haynes King, they're high on him, a dual threat guy who can really move. He ran for 737 yards last year, that's pretty dang good. And sometimes when you get a quarterback who can run and throw, that's where your upsets happen. But I can't find the 6 wins in there. That you can get an upset between a Miami and an NC State. That's 1 win. I don't see their.
Yeah, I mean they've had some success with Carolina.
Yeah,
but
6 wins is a lot.
That is a lot.
I got to go with the under on Georgia Tech.
All right, so lock it in. Jeff's got under on Georgia Tech. All right, so for my next pick, you can go up to the 8.5 and give me the Cardinals over 8.5. And I'll tell you why. Brom for one, he's just a great coach. They put out coach rankings for the ACC as well. I think it was the same people that did your quarterback rankings. I don't know where Brom was, but I know he was high. I think he was in the top 3 or 4 anyway. Not only that, they've hit the portal hard again this year. I think they have the number 1 recruiting class through the portal. Go ahead and give me Louisville schedule, Jeff. So, yeah, I mean, you come out of the gate with 2 gimmies.
I'm sorry. I was thinking you said NC State. No, I was trying to force NC State down your throat. I wasn't paying attention.
You come out with 2 gimmies, then you get Georgia Tech at home. Again, that should be a win. Tough game at Notre Dame. I'd probably say that's a loss. SMU at home, at Virginia versus Miami, at Boston College, at Clemson. Again, at Clemson could be tricky. But I definitely think this is probably a 9-3 team. It could be 10-2. There's a couple of games on here that you could, they'll be underdogs in more than likely. But again, I don't want to give some of my other picks away by talking too much in this one. But yeah, I definitely take Louisville over the 8.5 and feel pretty good about that.
All right. Well, let me go up. I want to take a look at Clemson. the 9.5s. Because their offense has just been a struggle since Trevor Lawrence left.
Heck on it, Jeff. This is the first time you've sniped me in this draft. That's a terrible feeling. I hate getting sniped.
I've been sniped twice, but it's what it is. I could have took those teams earlier too. So, but I look at Clemson's schedule, and you open with Georgia. That's always a tough game in Atlanta. Appalachian State's a win. NC State's a tough game. You say that's a win. Stanford a win. At Florida State, another tough game. At Wake Forest should be a win. Home against Virginia is probably a win. Louisville's another tough game, but it's at home. At Virginia Tech, though, that's a third game that could potentially take that L. And then you got your rivalry at the end of the year with South Carolina. You don't ever know, but offensively, we know their defense is going to come to play, but I'm a little bit concerned about them offensively. So I'm thinking they're going to go 9-3.
Yeah, I definitely.
What was your pick going to be there?
It was definitely an under, 100%. I think they could lose to NC State. They will lose at Florida State, I believe. No guarantees. Definitely a losable game, we'll say.
Right.
Louisville, I think, is a very losable game. At Virginia Tech, very losable game. And you have to win all the rest of them. South Carolina, very losable game. So you have to win almost all of them. I mean, you can only lose 3 or 2 to get to 10. So
right.
I don't like their odds of doing that. All right, so Jeff, if you would go to the 6.5, show me the Duke schedule.
Duke.
All right, so Elon versus Middle Tennessee go ahead and lock me in for under 6.5. Duke's replacing a new coach they've got a new coach this year coming in again.
And quarterback.
Yep, and quarterback. And they've had I know they've lost some guys through the portal from that team that was I would say they overachieved previously last year. And again, it's not an easy schedule. At Northwestern is not an easy game ever. UConn's going to be better in football this year. They've been better. They've kind of been getting better gradually. At Middle Tennessee, you think an ACC school would win that game, but again, we're not talking about a powerhouse. And Middle Tennessee, like you said, we're ODU guys. When ODU has a team come in from the ACC, it's loud, it's packed, and Middle Tennessee is going to bring some fans to that. So I just don't see them getting to 7 at all. Best case scenario would be 6, and I don't think they get that. I think they probably finish 4-8, 5-7.
All right, let me go. I'm gonna stay in the 6.5s. I want to take a look at Syracuse. So Syracuse has a new quarterback this year. I mean, a new coaching staff, everything this year. So we'll see how that goes. But their big transfer pickup out of Ohio State, who played in 6 games last season at Ohio State, Kyle McCord. So you get credibility just coming from Ohio State. And Ohio, Georgia Tech, Stanford, Holy Cross, you could see them start out 4-1, 5-0.
Yep.
UConn down there. At Cal, that's a pick'em game. Boston College, a pick'em game. Virginia Tech's an L. Pittsburgh, maybe a pick'em game. I think NC State's better. And so I'm going to take Syracuse in the over.
Yeah, if I had to choose there, I would pick the over for them as well. Strictly off the quarterback play, I think McCord's going to play well for them. All right, so for my next pick, Jeff, if you would, gosh, I'm debating between these two. Going up to NC State for me. Let me take a look.
I knew you wanted them.
All right. So Tennessee's an L at Clemson. I don't like that game being at Clemson. But otherwise, I like that schedule. Give me the over 8.5. Doran has been a consistent winner, you know, and he's, you know, I think they've won 9 3 years in a row, and I could be wrong on that. I need to look that up. But I think NC State, you know, they're just consistent, and that schedule is not that tough. Outside of at Clemson, they do got to travel to Cal, but again, Cal's not great. I worry about all these ACC teams when they go out west for the first time because it's just, you know, not something they're accustomed to. And how will they play in those situations? But at North Carolina, rivalry game to finish the year could very well determine whether they hit that over or not.
Hey, well, I'm just going to go right next to this one. Let's go to North Carolina. Look at that schedule. Over and under 7.5. There's no Drake May anymore. Minnesota, Charlotte, North Carolina Central's a win. JMU, that could go either way. 7.5 feels like a lot for me. Wake Forest should be a win. At Virginia, 7.5.
You know, we've beaten Carolina.
I know we have.
5 out of the last 7.
Yeah, that's the one team we tend to have their number. I'm gonna take that. But Jay's trying to get me to take the under by making that comment. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say they're going to finish with 7 wins. They're going to be 7-5. A step back. They losing Drake May. 7-5, 6-6 this year. You know, you've been rolling at the quarterback from Sam Howell to Drake May, and now you're finally having to. It's like a little bit of a rebuild, I guess you could say. But I'm gonna take the under for North Carolina.
All right, going down to the 5.5s for me. If you would bring up the Pitt Panthers. Okay. Let's talk about their number. They're at 5.5. Look, Pitt has the lowest ranked quarterback on that list of ACC quarterbacks, and this is hard for me to say. Let me just say I'm taking the under first, but I respect the heck out of their coach Narduzzi. I think he's a great coach, and so, but we're getting near the end of the draft, right? Right. They got the worst quarterback potentially in the ACC, potentially. Kent State's probably a win. At Cincinnati's probably a loss. West Virginia, I'm going to say that's a loss. Youngstown State, I'm not giving them a win there. Right, it's probably a win, but that's a good program. At North Carolina, loss. Cal and Syracuse, probably those 2 games, determine it because, they're going to have to win all the games that you think they have a chance in to get to 6.
They do have
I can count to 6 real quick that they're not going to win, in my opinion. So then they pretty much have to win all the games that are either should or toss up, and I just don't see that happening. So
they do have a transfer out of Alabama at quarterback on the roster as well.
Yeah, they say he'll compete, but even if he plays, again, I'm not expecting a whole lot out of this team. I think Virginia beats them, and that tells you, I don't have a whole lot of.
Well, you had Virginia as an over, so that doesn't tell me anything.
Well, yeah, but the over is not hard to hit when it's 4.5.
Oh gosh, yeah. So one of the things that's hard for us is these West Coast, these new ACC teams coming in from the West Coast. None of us has picked one. I'm not going to pick one this time either. I'm going to go. I just want to take a look at our friends over at Boston College.
Oh, yeah, that's where I was going next.
With their new coach situation too. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. I thought they were
I like their quarterback.
Yes, and that's what I was about to say. And then with the new coaching staff, Florida State is an L. Duquesne, you can get a win. Missouri's going to be tough. Michigan State's tough. Western Kentucky, that's 2 wins.
I take it back. That schedule, they're not getting the 5. I plan to take the over, but good Lord.
SMU's probably, oh, man. That's tough.
I can't get much past 3 there, Jeff.
Yeah.
If it were me. But
I
that's your
know.
pick.
Well, in my brain, I was thinking over as I was pulling up to the schedule myself. But looking at that, when you have a non-conference schedule where you're going to travel to Missouri, you're playing Michigan State at home, and you got to open the year with Florida State on the road. Your home schedule says you got Duquesne, which should be a win, but Michigan State, Western Kentucky coming out of Sun Belt. Are they in the Sun Belt now, right? Or Conference USA? We've seen them from ODU.
Yeah.
They're no gimmies. Louisville at home, that's another tough game. Syracuse, I already picked the over for Syracuse. North Carolina at home, I just went under, but this is one of the games I had them as getting into that 6 or 7 win mark, and then you just praised up Pittsburgh. So I'm going to go ahead and take the under on Boston College. I'm going to say they're going to finish with 3 or 4 wins. So give me the under in Boston College.
All right. Yeah, I don't know where to go because these teams are the ones I'm least familiar with. But show me SMU.
Cal, Stanford, and SMU is what you got left.
Yeah, the newbies.
Well, you said SMU.
Yep. So Houston Christian will give them a win there. Good Lord.
BYU, TCU, Florida State, Louisville, 4 in a row. That's a tough stretch
stretch. There's no way. Give me the under all day.
I got to tell you, as I was looking at that, I was ready to move it from and take that one myself. You're taking the under.
Yeah, under 7.5.
We've had a lot of unders tonight.
They have a good quarterback, but still, that schedule is brutal. And you know how these things go sometimes, Joe. It's like we always say, when you play somebody matters, because if they don't know that they're bad yet, they're going to give you everything they got.
Right.
And the flip side of that is once you start to lose games, you can lose, especially in the transfer portal era. You're going to lose kids mentally, and you lose them mentally, it's over.
Right.
I mean,
dang, that's tough. And then, also this is them playing in the Power 5 here.
Right.
We'll see what happens there with that quarterback, once he plays the big boy UVA defense. But anyway, so you got SMU. So now we got Cal and Stanford. I might as well go back to Stanford because I've already looked at them one time. Might as well go ahead and do something with them. The one thing I do know about Stanford is Andrew Luck's not walking back through the door.
No.
And when I originally took a look at him, I was thinking about 4 wins could happen. I was thinking I would be taking over till I looked at the schedule, and I see TCU, I see Syracuse, I see Clemson, I see Virginia Tech, I see Notre Dame. Right there, you're 1-3. That's 1-5 to start. SMU at home, and
who
SMU.
was that in the opener, Jeff?
That's TCU.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, TCU.
Okay.
And then
when I'm looking at it, my eyes are bad, and it's late at night. I saw ICU, and I said, "Who the heck is ICU?"
Oh, man, they might send them to ICU, but SMU would be the next winnable game, and then we just talked about giving them an under, and we know they're going to win some games, and so this is one of them that they gotta win. So Stanford and Wake Forest would be a good game. That might be number 2. NC State's probably an L. Louisville's an L. Cal's probably an L. San Jose State, I don't know anything about. So, dang, to think finishing with only 3 or 2 wins. But I'm going to go ahead and take Stanford. Man. Good gracious.
We might as well pull up the final team here. Cal 6.5.
Yeah, let me pull them up because
I need to see the schedule to know.
I'm gonna make my decision. I haven't made a decision yet. 6.5.
Oh, okay.
UC Davis with a win. Auburn's a L. San Diego State, I don't know. Florida State's an L. That's 2 L's. Miami.
See a lot of L's here.
Pitt. Syracuse, NC State, Oregon State. Yeah. Let me go ahead. Let me just stick to my Stanford. And I looked at that schedule and I would have said the under, but 3.5 is so low. Those guys are
Right.
smart guys out there in Stanford. They're smart, and so I'm
And you're
gonna
going to be catching some of these ACC schools. Somebody's going to slip
coming
up
on
and
the
lose
West
when they
Coast.
go to the West Coast.
I'm gonna take the over 3.5 for Stanford.
I like it. Actually, agree. So for Cal, I'm looking at them. We should really just close out the show by talking about them. But what we should do, Jeff, is post our drafts and then put up a Twitter poll and see who made the best selections.
We will do that. We will get that done.
All right, I like it. So this is not even an official pick because we got to be even, right? We both have 8.
Oh, that's
right
true.
now. So let's just say, what would you take for this one? 7 is a lot to ask. I think.
Yeah, I would take the under.
I would take the under.
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking 17 teams, so that evens us out anyway. There, we both would take the under there anyway.
Yep.
So, well, we'll hit Twitter and post our picks, our drafts, and we'll put a poll up and see what you, the viewers, think, and who do you think is going to win this thing.
Yeah, who had better picks?
Yeah, so we're going to wrap things up tonight. We appreciate you tuning into the ACC Huddle, the first edition, as part of the College Huddle. Go to thecollegehuddle.com. There are podcast representations from pretty much any school in the country. You can go on there, find your team, get information about them, learn about their podcast, tune into their podcast. Follow the College Huddle on YouTube, on Twitter. Also, Jay and I are both with the Cavalier Connection, so definitely tune in if you're a Virginia fan. If you're not a Virginia fan, come in and if you want to troll us a couple times, we'll come back right back at you.
Pickers,
yeah, we can call a booger picker if you want. Quick apologies tonight on YouTube. This is still new for Jay and I and some of these aspects of this podcasting, and I went in and I thought I had it uploaded to go to YouTube, and it wasn't showing originally. So I apologize for anyone who was trying to listen. I missed clicking a button to make it available to the public. So I guess I just thought that, I don't know what I thought. So we'll get our hiccups taken care of. We'll get the tweaks taken care of between here and getting it over to Twitter as it should be. But we do appreciate you tuning in. This was a little bit of a long episode tonight. We won't typically go this long, but we felt it was important to listen to Ben from the Bull City coordinators and get a little update, since this ACC stuff seems to be getting pretty big on these lawsuits. And but we're going to have a little bit of fun next week. We will have the Red White podcast will be on to discuss they were the darlings of the NCAA tournament and the ACC tournament. And so we discussing a little bit of the basketball season, men's and women's. So other than that, we really appreciate everyone tuning in. Be sure to leave us comments, like us on the College Huddle, like us on the Cavalier Connection, YouTube, Twitter, subscribe to the College Huddle YouTube page, subscribe to the Cavalier Connection page, Talk UVA Sports on Twitter, and the College Huddle on Twitter. But definitely tune in, and we can't wait to catch up with everyone next week. Everyone have a great night.